Hi, and welcome to another episode of Geography Made Easy. In this episode, we will be trying to again make difficult geographical concepts easy. In this chapter, we will be looking at the natural vegetation of India. The first question that comes to our mind when we are doing this chapter, when we are studying this chapter, is that what is natural vegetation? The definition of natural vegetation is that vegetation that adapts to the natural environment and grow unhindered without any human interference. That means that any vegetation without any kind of human interventions is known as the natural vegetation. Natural vegetation is very much suited to the environment or the ecosystem of the area. These are natural ecosystems which occur in a particular area. Nowadays, we do not see natural vegetation to a great extent. This kind of undisturbed natural vegetation is called the virgin vegetation. Virgin vegetation in India is found in very remote and inaccessible parts of the Himalayas, the Thar deserts, and in some cases in the Sundarban Delta region. But the area or the region is very less, so it becomes insignificant. Natural vegetation can be divided into two types or two components. One is the flora and the other is the forest. What is flora? Flora is a plant, a category of plant, a particular species of plant that is found in a particular region. Example, we can have particular Sundari trees as a species which is found in the Sundarban area. On the other hand, we have forest which is made out of many different types of vegetation, different types of flora, usually having or not having dense growth, seen in a particular area. So what is the difference between flora and vegetation? Flora is when a particular species of plants occur at a particular place. On the other hand, vegetation is the assemblage of many different kinds of plant species living in an area or an ecosystem. So ecosystems have different kinds of species of flora, but together they form the vegetation. In India, the Indian forests can be divided broadly into 6 types, and we will be looking at each of these forests separately. The first forest type is the tropical evergreen rainforest. The second is the deciduous forest. Then we have the dry forest, and the fourth is the arid forest. Then we have the delta forest, also known as mangroves. And finally, we have the mountainous forests. Very broadly, let us look at the flora divisions. We have the mountain forest in this part. So mostly in the snow-covered peak area, we can have the mountain forests. We will have the tropical evergreen rainforest in certain parts of the northeast, usually the Garo Khasi Jaintia hill region in the northeast, and to some extent over the wetter part of the western Ghats and the western coastal plain. Though we are broadly generalizing the vegetation types, they do not occur continuously as we are drawing. Natural vegetation has been highly encroached upon by human activities, and this will unfold as we do this chapter. Then we have the monsoon forests. The monsoon forests occur in this part, in the plain areas. There is some amount of tropical evergreen rainforest occurring in this part as well. We have the very dry, very dry tropical dry forest in the Thar area, which is around this, Gujarat and Rajasthan. Some amount of arid forest in the middle of the plateau regions of the Deccan Plateau, and the rest of the area has tropical dry forest. So this entire area has tropical dry forest. Now we come to the last type, which is the mangrove forest. The mangrove forest, I'll represent it with purple, occurs in the delta regions of Indus, Ganga Brahmaputra delta, in Mahanadi delta region, Krishna and Kaveri delta regions. So very broadly speaking, this is the broad division of the vegetation which we see in different parts of India. This particular map may be asked in the examination to test the knowledge of location of the forest types within the Indian subcontinent. We will be starting with the first type of vegetation, which is the tropical evergreen rainforests. The tropical evergreen rainforests are located in two parts of the country. One is in the northeast and the other is in the wetter parts of the Western Ghats. So we have tropical evergreen rainforests located in the wetter parts of the Western Ghats, and we have the rainforest located in this part. For simplicity, the southern part of the northeast is also shown as having evergreen rainforests. Now we'll go into the characteristics of the tropical evergreen rainforests. So they are seen in very hot and humid areas with a lot of heavy rainfall. So the average rainfall in this part here is around 200 centimeter with average temperatures of 24 degrees Celsius. So hot and humid conditions have to be present for the luxuriant growth to be seen. The vegetation is very tall and dense, where the average height of the trees is between the 45 meters to 60 meters. This kind of vegetation is seen around the equatorial regions in other parts of the world. So forests like the Amazon or the Central African forests to some extent correspond to the evergreen rainforest types. So there is canopy structure. That means the different trees have different heights. So we have tall trees, we have shorter trees. So they occur in the form of layers. So it is a canopy structure, and this does not enable sunlight to reach the forest floor. So sunlight is prevented from reaching the floor. So hence we don't see dense undergrowth at the bottom. However, the bottom in many cases is covered by forest litter, that is trees, bark, etc., which has fallen from this canopy and they have fallen at the bottom and it is decomposing. These decomposed organic material add nutrients into the soil, which enable more and more luxuriant growth of the trees. Many different types of flora and fauna are seen in this forest. So many different types of species are usually growing in this forest. Some examples of the trees are rubber, mahogany, ebony. So we have the hardwood trees and they are very sturdy. So they are seen in these states: Andaman and Nicobar Islands, Assam, Meghalaya, Nagaland, Manipur, Mizoram, Tripura. So that means most of the parts of the northeastern states, West Bengal, and western slopes of the Western Ghats. The trees are hardwood. Let us look at a photograph of this plant species. We see luxuriant type of plant growth where the canopy structure, so we have ferns, creepers, etc. growing over the trees, and we have these tall hardwood trees which are growing. So different species, many different kinds of species grow here. There is thick leaf litter at the bottom, which is actually adding to the fertility of the soil. Next we have the tropical deciduous or the monsoon types of forest. The monsoon type of forest is seen in parts of North India, that is the central plains of North India. So this is more or less the place, and beyond, just beyond the wetter western coast, we have a strip of the monsoon forests which are seen. So just this is lying very close to the evergreen rainforest. Now let us look at the characteristics of the trees. They are found in areas which receive 100 to 200 centimeter of rainfall. So just a little bit lesser than the monsoon type, and obviously the humidity is less here. Trees shed their leaves during the beginning of the summer season. So we find deciduous trees. Deciduous trees have seasons when they shed the leaves. On the other hand, when we were looking at evergreen forests in the trees do not shed their leaves all at one time. But in case of a deciduous forest, we see that trees shed their leaves in one season, usually in the summer season, to effectively reduce the harmful effects of drought-like conditions. Height of the trees are around 30 to 40 centimeters. Some examples are sal, teak, shisham, sandalwood. And this is the place where they are seen: Western Ghats, northeast part of Peninsular Plateau, and foothills of the Himalayas in the Shivalik ranges. Trees provide good wood for building purpose and is economically important. So the deciduous forests are important economically. This is how a deciduous forest looks. So this part of the deciduous forest is experiencing autumn. So the tree shedding has started. So autumn-like conditions. So this might be just before the summer, when the tree loses all its leaf to reduce harmful impact of droughts. Next we have the tropical dry forest, or the very the very dry forests which are seen in India. The tropical dry forests occur in most of the central peninsular part of the plateau region and parts of the northern plain, also the southern parts. Usually this is encompassing the plateau areas of India. So what are the characteristics of tropical dry forests? They have rainfall which is 550 to 100 centimeters. This is the average rainfall. Trees are less dense and shorter in height. Some plants have fleshy stems and long roots to search for water. So tropical dry forests can also be called as the semi-arid forests. Height of the trees is 6 to 9 meters. It is stunted because of less amount of rainfall. Some examples of trees are neem, shisham, babul. They are seen in large parts of Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Karnataka, Punjab, Haryana, and Tamil Nadu. Most of these forests have been cleared for cultivation because we can see that it is occurring in the states which are having flat areas. So the trees have been, especially if we look at Punjab, Haryana, parts of Karnataka, the tree cover has been removed, irrigation has been brought in, and cultivation has started. Next, we move into the arid forest. The arid forests, though we are calling it forest, is the very dry kind of natural vegetation which occur in the western part of India, encompassing parts of Rajasthan and Gujarat. So this is the part where we have the arid forests. What are the characteristics of the arid forests? They are found in areas which is receiving less than 50 centimeters of rainfall. So basically, these can also be called as desert vegetation. Trees are much less dense. They occur in far away from one another. They are very short in height. Many trees have thick fleshy stems to store water and have very long roots to search for water. So xerophytic type of vegetation is can be seen in this part, especially as we move more towards the west in the desert area. In we can see xerophytes, that is cacti group of plants, and a little towards the east we see that there are trees which have very long roots and thick fleshy stems to store water. The plants have leaves which are small and modified to thorns to reduce loss of water by evaporation and transpiration. This is very important. So this plant modifies its body to suit itself in the harsh conditions which is seen in the arid areas. Some examples of the trees are kikar, babul, thorny bush and shrub. They are seen in Rajasthan, Gujarat, southwest Punjab and Haryana. And wood from this kind of tree is generally used for cooking purposes for fuel. So this kind of vegetation is the arid vegetation, where we can see we have these large luxuriant cacti and babul trees growing on the landscape. Next we have the delta forests. The delta forests do not occur in all parts of India. The area is very less. It is occurring at the delta regions. We have the Ganga Brahmaputra delta, we have Mahanadi delta somewhere here, and we have the Krishna and the Kaveri deltas respectively. The western side of near the Arabian Sea, the delta forests are missing because the sea all of a sudden it becomes pretty deep. The Arabian Sea comparatively shallow. The sea is shallow in the Bay of Bengal, and the sediments which are being brought into the sea from the rivers and the deltas get formed, they are more suitable for development of vegetation as is seen in the delta forests. The western part does not also have this kind of vegetation because deltas do not have not formed from the rivers which are flowing into the west. They are not carrying too much sediment. The tides are very active, and hence deposition does not take place. But on the other hand, the eastern side of India, the coastal regions, sees a lot of these delta forests. We also see some delta forests, but of course it is very minor. We see these delta forests in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. In some of the islands it is seen. What is the characteristics of the delta forests? Mangrove, a special kind of tree, grows in this forest. They have pneumatophores or breathing roots, so roots which can get submerged during the high tide, but can be again can get exposed during low tide. This kind of breathing roots are called the pneumatophores. The mangroves are the species which have pneumatophores because these forests are constantly getting submerged during the high tide and again coming out during the low tide. So if a normal tree grows in this condition, the roots will rot, but in case of pneumatophores, where the plant has modified itself, its root has modified so that it can survive in this condition. The plants fall in the category of halophytes, which means that they can grow in salty conditions. So the group of plants which can grow in salty conditions are known as halophytes, and mangroves are a kind of halophytes. Some of the trees growing in this place are the Sundari, the Hetal, the Gorao, and the Kaura. So the places where this kind of forest is found is Ganga Brahmaputra Delta, Mahanadi Delta, Krishna Delta, Kaveri Delta, and Andaman and Nicobar Islands. In case of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, the forests are very tiny. They are occurring over small regions, so it is not so significant to be marked in the map where we were showing the forest areas. So this is how a, a marshy land looks, a delta or tidal forest looks. These are the new metaphors, which are the breathing roots, which get submerged during high tide, but will again get exposed, where the pneumatophores also have the spike kind of features, which it is not visible here but they are there, which are the breathing roots which are exposed, which are taking in the oxygen from when it is getting exposed during the low tide. Lastly, we will be looking at the mountain forests. In the case of the mountain forest, we are talking of high elevation mountains. So this kind of forest is seen in the Himalayan regions. Um, so we have the entire Jammu and Kashmir into consideration. We have parts of Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, which is taking into consideration Sikkim, parts of West Bengal, and Assam, mostly Arunachal Pradesh. So where we have snow-peaked mountains as well, we are talking about those. But also I would like to mention here that though we have marked it homogeneously as mountain forests, the forests or the tree line occurs up to a certain elevation beyond which it will vanish. So that has to be understood in this case. So the very extreme northern part of India, especially Ladakh, where we have the cold desert, or the very snow-covered mountain peak area, we do not see any kind of vegetation. It's completely arid. But to simplify, we are taking it into consideration and clubbing it under mountainous forest. Characteristics of the mountain forests are they are divided into two types broadly, the Himalayan forests and the peninsular forests. The Himalayan forests all lie above 1000 meters, but then we have different divisions. The foothills have mountains which we have vegetation which is lying over 1000 to 2000 meters with oak, chestnut, sal, these type of plants there. Then we have vegetation between 2000 to 3000 meter, which are the temperate forests with evergreen trees growing there like oak, laurel, chestnut. Then above 3000 meter we have the alpine pastures and the forests, which where we have the fern, juniper, pine, birch, where we have the trees which are shaped in such a way that the snow does not accumulate on the branches of the tree. So we have triangular shape of trees. in the very high altitudes, and there is no vegetation present above the snow line. So above that lies the snow line, and no vegetation is present above the snow line. On the other hand, the peninsular hills have different kinds of vegetation, that is the rainforest, shrub, mosses and fern growing together, and they are seen in Nilgiris, Mahabaleshwar, certain parts of Western Ghats, Satpura, etc. This is the photo of the mountains in the Himalayas, the mountain forests with fog and a river. Now let us look at the last part of the chapter. So India has been losing its forest cover steadily, and around only 21% of the India's geographical area is covered by forest, which is a thing of concern, and that has been kind of moderated. That has been people have the policymakers have tried to look into that through certain forest policies. So we have the first forest policy of 1952, just made post independence, which was later modified in 1988. This forest policy actually dates back to 1894, which was made by the British government. So basically the national forest policies tries to ensure that development is done in such a manner that the forest ecosystems get preserved. And in some cases, the new policy, the revised policy, talks of environmental stability, soil erosion check, to ensure that the rivers, lakes have enough water and there is no soil erosion there. Substantial forest cover or afforestation measures are also taken, that the loss of forest products because of the lumbing etc. is, or fuel wood is checked, and also to ensure that the people who are directly dependent on the forest, such as the tribal population, their needs are met. We then have the Forest Conservation Act of 1980, which is again an act which talks about how forests should be protected in India. We have the Integrated Forest Protection Scheme, which came in the 11th five-year plan, which talks about a few things, which is forest fire control, infrastructure to preserve forests, demarcation of surveys done to make sure that the forests, the areas are properly maintained, protection and conservation of sacred groves or places which have cultural importance to tribes and other communities who are living in these forests, conservation and restoration of certain kinds of unique vegetation and ecosystems which need to be recognized properly, to make sure that invasive species, that is species which are not native to a particular area, they do not come and invade in a particular area, wiping off the native species. So invasive species should be checked. Certain examples of invasive species are rats and mice are invasive species who go to a particular area and they can adjust to that environment, and they slowly draw out or they kill the other flora and fauna which live in that particular place. And finally, we have management of bamboo forests, especially in the under the Integration Forest Protection Scheme, where bamboo is recognized as an important plant which needs proper conservation. Now we come to certain kinds of conservation measures, which is here we'll talk about the Van Mahotsav. So Van Mahotsav The idea came up when every individual was asked to plant trees. So there was a festival of planting trees. So one means a forest in Sanskrit, and Mahotsav means a festival. So festival of planting trees. This is done during the monsoon so that the trees which are planted, they can survive during the monsoon season. They get enough rain and their roots can spread and they can survive. So this is one very good measure where the common people and everybody gets involved into the forest conservation measure. Also, another concept which is important here, which needs to be understood, is the concept of social forestry. Social forestry is for the people who are dependent on the forest, for people who are living close to the forest. The social forestry is also called community forestry, where quick growing plants are planted in and around a settlement, which is protecting the settlement, giving it a green cover, and these quick growing plants can be used as fuel. So in common area or common land owned by the community, these forest covers are being cultivated, and the harvest which is reaped from this forest cover, which can be any kind of um, particularly any kind of fuel, fodder, or any other kind of use it can have, that is used by the entire community. So social forestry concept has been widely accepted, and it has seen a lot of positive impact on the forest cover. It has reduced soil erosion, the barren area has become green, and it has led to the betterment of life of rural people. This was introduced for the first time by the National Commission of Agriculture in the year 1976. And finally, when forests are very important for the indigenous communities, especially people living in fragile environments, and we see one movement, there has been several movements in India to protect forests, and one of them, which is of very high significance, is the Chipko movement of 1972 under the leadership of Sundarlal Bahuguna and Chandi Prasad Bhat, where the villagers started hugging trees to protect them from being cut down. It is also called a tree hugging movement, where the women of the village, they came out of the house to hug the trees to protect them. They said they would like to be killed before the trees could be locked down. This particular movement started in Uttarakhand but gradually spread to other states as well, such as Himachal Pradesh, Jammu and Kashmir, Arunachal Pradesh, Rajasthan, Karnataka, Bihar, Jharkhand, Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, and Maharashtra, where we see that natural vegetation forests do occur. This is the photo of the tree hugging movement, where the resistance, the villagers, the women of the village have come out and they are hugging the tree and calling it their own. So very old trees, they need to be protected from being locked down. It's important that we understand how important forests are for the communities which are living in these fragile environments. So finally we come to the last part, which is important questions for the exam. From this chapter, they can ask you the characteristics of different forest types of India, which has come in many of the ISC examinations. And where they are found, what are the characteristics? They can ask you difference between two types of plant species. For example, evergreen rainforest and thorn forest. They can ask you such differences. Or deciduous forest and evergreen rainforest. So these can be asked. Terms can be asked, such as what is the meaning of xerophytes, what is the meaning of pneumatophores. For 2 mark questions, these questions can be asked. And briefly, they have asked questions numerous times about the forest conservation movements and forest policies. So in many of the ISC examinations in the past years, it is seen that questions of these type, like what is social forestry, and what is the forest policy of 1988, what were the main aims of forest policy, what is the importance of one mahotsav, these kind of questions can be asked in this chapter. So map pointing is not as important as we see in the other chapters, but questions can be asked from map pointing. Here this is comparatively simpler, where we have to remember where which forest is occurring on the Indian map. So a rough border or demarcation of that particular area will be enough for the examination. So if you have any doubts and questions, please leave a comment in the chat section. And if you have found the video useful, please like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe and press the bell icon to subscribe to my channel and spread widely. See you in the next video.